And then we could finally start actually building the track. So that has been going on roughly for the last year or so, from initial planning through making sure the
really?
laser scan and everything's ready. And all this time we kept it a secret for you guys.
That's probably the longest and best kept secret in sim racing, because these things have a habit of breaking free into the wild. I mean, it's a massive amount of time, isn't it? 3 years, really, in terms of negotiating and then building a track. A phenomenal achievement, actually. And you say it's a laser scan. So when's this laser scan from? As I spin the car and just about save it.
This scan is actually done last year during the race. I mean, there's only a couple of weeks that this track actually exists, so you don't have many options for getting it scanned. So this was the latest scan available. I'm sure they'll rescan it again this year after the race. I don't think there's huge differences this year, but yeah, it's a 2018 version of the track, really, and you can also see that in some of the ads along the road. They are still from the 2018 version. We might update the ads in an update later on. That's still being discussed at the moment, so I'm not sure about that yet. But yeah, 2018 is when the scan was done, so that's the official version of the track.
And talking sort of about building the track, how many people at Studio 397 does it take to put something like this together? Is it a special project team itself, or has this been running alongside some of the other projects, like obviously you've got Nordschleife, which is another humongous undertaking?
Yeah, so it's not been a constant number of people, as you pointed out correctly, that we've been working on a few things in parallel. I mean, last year after Sim Expo, we announced that we got the license for Nordschleife and that we were building that. So obviously there was a team working on that one. But just in general, when we build a track, the first thing we do is obviously make sure we have the laser scan and all the data, and that gets processed. And after that, the first step is to actually build the track surface and what we call everything up to the barrier. So that's the whole area where you can race your car.
Yeah.
Not
So
where you should be racing your car, but the area you can reach until you crash into something, basically.
I've already explored that twice on my outlap. Come into the pits and start again. Right, talking about we've got Le Mans, which is the absolute pinnacle of endurance circuits, I suppose. GT3s, they've got the GTE Pros and a few prototype type cars. Is it fair to say that you're positioning RF2 as an endurance racing simulation now?
Well, I think that has always been one of the strengths of the simulation, so we wanted to explore that a bit more, especially since right from the beginning we've been told that we should go after more high-profile licenses and we should go after whole classes of cars instead of doing one car per class. So this was naturally one of the big targets that we had and have. But we're not exclusively focusing on that. I mean, we've done a few historic cars. You've seen some of the McLarens we did last year. And we're still working on this big Tatus pack that seems to last forever. But we are really in the final stages of making that work. Just doing some bug fixing on the 3D models and last final tweaks to the physics. We're getting a lot of data from racing teams there, so we just want to make sure we do a good job at replicating those cars. So yeah, there's a lot of things going on. There's definitely a focus on these GT and prototype cars, but we do want to keep this an all-round simulation with all kinds of different cars and tracks, really.
Now, just for the benefit of those watching the video that may not know, I'm keeping this conversation between us mostly centred on Le Mans because we're actually in the middle of doing a much larger interview with you, 100 plus questions from the community that'll focus on rFactor 2 itself. So I don't want people to be thinking why you're not asking about UIs and Nordschleife and whatnot. That will come in a separate interview, folks. So this is more a Le Mans celebration interview than anything else. But Marcel, regarding this here beautiful track, RF2's had a bit of criticism, I suppose it's fair to say, in the past about the way that the AI behave in Slipstream, and slipstreaming is a big element of Le Mans 24 Hour. Is there anything being done or going to be done to address some of those AI concerns, either now or in the near future?
Well, we'll definitely address that in the near future. There's some code changes we need to make to improve the AI, to further tweak it. I mean, there's two parts to it, right? There's making sure that all the AI lines on the track are done correctly. That helps a lot. And then there's a few areas where basically the intelligence of the AI is not up to par, and we should really go into the code and make some tweaks to make them perform better. Slipstreaming is one thing, and actually on Le Mans, because this is such a wide track, they seem to do a lot better in terms of slipstreaming here, but we also want to fix that for the more narrow tracks that we've released. So it's on our agenda, but we're pushing back some of these things because we really want to get the UI and competition system done first, and then go back and do some of the core things. It's just a matter of getting stuff done before you move on to the next thing, really.
Especially as, like I say, quite a new studio, limited staffing and resources and whatnot. It's quite a juggling act, I would imagine, in what priorities you guys have got cooking at any one time.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, we've tried to be as open as we can in our roadmaps and try to predict when stuff is done. And sometimes we get it horribly wrong. And I think with the UI, we definitely got it horribly wrong. It's fair to say that. I was being way too optimistic about the amount of work involved, and then there were a few other things the studio was doing in parallel that also didn't help in terms of getting this done. So we learned from that and try to make better predictions going forward. But there's always a lot of stuff going on. I mean, you probably have seen that we've been helping Amazon with the Grand Tour game. That's a project that had been ongoing for about a year and a half. Obviously, we could not tell anything about that, but it's still something that kept a lot of people in the studio busy. And it was a great experience for us being involved in such a project as well. So we learned a lot from it, and we'll apply that knowledge going forward. But yeah, that sometimes means that you can't meet the deadlines or the targets you set yourself, and you communicate it. And you can't always tell people about why that is either, because, well, this was something we couldn't really tell people what we were doing. So what do you tell them? It's just going to be a bit slower, right? So yeah.
In a day and age where we've got instant communication and the internet and everything, there is an appetite to know as much as possible about these projects and whatnot. So yeah, quite a challenging position for yourselves. But obviously Le Mans looks pretty much finished. Are you in a position where you can give us an idea when this will go on sale to the general public?
I can, as I think. Oh, actually, something goes wrong on my system now. Well, we hadn't had that one, right? I mean, we've had some crashes on every system so far, but now mine is going down. I'll just answer the question and then rejoin the session for you guys. I can actually tell something. I mean, pretty much, if you look at the track in its current state, it's ready to be released. So we're sitting here and actually waiting until we get the green light from ACO, so basically approval to get this track released. We've been in discussion with them. They've given us some feedback over the last couple of weeks on mainly small stuff that we still needed to change. We did those changes, and yeah, we're just basically waiting on final approval right now. We're on top of that. In fact, we've got one of our guys from studio just traveled to Le Mans. We'll be meeting ACO tomorrow So we hope to get the green light then. That's
cool.
by no means a promise, because I don't know how that conversation will go. It might also mean that that they have some further comments that we need to address. But yeah, it's probably fair to say that within the next 2 weeks or so, we'll definitely get this track out.
Oh, that's fantastic news, because it's I've not really done any lapping on this apart from when we started our conversation an hour or so ago, and it's a beautiful track. I mean, the difference a laser scan makes to some of the mod versions that we've had. We were talking off air. It's a really bumpy surface. It's a surprisingly difficult drive around here. Quite an enjoyable experience. Does it surprise you how the laser scans transferred into the virtual version?
Well, initially, I think I had the same surprise as you just had today when you drove it for the first time, that it's a bit more bumpy than you kind of expected. I mean, it's fair probably to say, although I can't say it out loud, that there have been some versions of some track that resembles this one floating around, and people have been driving that. And most of those are a lot smoother, actually. And when we got the laser scan data and started converting that into the road meshes and stuff, we were already seeing that it's a bit more bumpy than you would guess from a lot of camera footage. And yeah, when you start driving it, you're like actually feeling a lot of these little bumps in the road here and there, and it's not a smooth surface. And I guess part of this track being a normal road most of the year also gives it part of that character with big trucks and everything driving these roads. So I guess that's part of it. It's more bumpy than I think most people expect when they do it the first time. So that's something that comes from the scanning process, I guess.
And has that level of detail caused any difficulties for you in terms of trying to keep performance optimization on the track as well? It's a big circuit, obviously, and a detailed road mesh even.
Well, yeah, obviously that's a challenge, because you want to put as much detail into it as you possibly can. So it's always going to be a trade-off. I mean, you still need to end up with a track that people can actually play and play well. So we spent quite a lot of time already on optimizing that road mesh. And we had obviously the experience doing that from Sebring, even though Sebring in terms of track length is smaller than this one. I would say that's partially offset by the fact that Sebring is even more bumpy. So when you look at how detailed your mesh needs to be to fit the actual point cloud, here we could go and get away with slightly bigger vertices than on Sebring, where there's so many bumps that you really end up with a very, very detailed mesh to represent that. This was a bit smoother, which means we had a little bit of more playing room, and that was good because the track's a lot longer as well. I think we've done a good job balancing it in terms of performance. That said, we thought we did that with Sebring as well, and we ended up doing a little bit of tweaking after release anyway. But I think overall it's pretty good already, and we're very happy with where we are now in terms of fidelity and performance.
I'm talking of the, you mentioned earlier the relationship with ACO, obviously the organising body of the Le Mans 24-hour, very heavily involved in sports car racing throughout the years. Is this a relationship that's a long-term partnership, or is it just literally get this track licensed and done and into the sim? Can we expect to see more fruits of that partnership that you've got going there?
It's always hard to predict that. I mean, the first step in this relationship is actually getting the track out and doing justice to ACO and their heritage there. So that's the first step, and we hope to finish that soon. And we hope that they are too happy with the way we've actually done the track. And obviously we'll keep talking about the future from there. I mean, there's obviously from all kinds of series, a lot of interest in esports in general, in racing, and we would love to be part of it. And that's another reason why we're pushing hard to get our competition system out, as that allows us to do a lot more in these areas. So we'll definitely extend the dialogue beyond just licensing the track and saying thank you and leaving again. But I can't be more specific at this point yet.
No, that's understandable. And talking of the track, do you have an idea of what sort of pricing structure you're going to be looking at for this when it does eventually become available?
Well, I would say it's probably going to be comparable to Sebring in terms of pricing structure. I'm keeping it a bit of a surprise, but yeah, that's what I can say right now.
Okay, no worries, thank you. We've got, we're racing at the moment, the endurance pack, so the Orica 07 prototype car, which is, of course, an LMP2 car that races in the real race. You've got some really good endurance tracks now, Marcel. It's time to start expanding those cars, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, what kind of cars or classes would you be looking for next, Paul?
To be fair, I love endurance racing, so WEC type things, or even just IMSA or anything like that. So, yeah, a GT, GTE, GT3 or prototype are all very much my bag. So anything like that would be well received, I think. Flesh out those classes a little bit,
Yeah,
if that's possible.
oh, I think that's certainly going to be possible in the future. Obviously, there's quite a few cars we don't have yet, even though I think we're getting to a point where we have a reasonable set. So yeah, you will probably see some new stuff being released later this year. It's, well, we're obviously also with interest following the developments in terms of what's going to happen with the LMP1 class. I think I've said a couple of times before that we have decided not to license LMP1 cars as they are right now, because obviously something new is coming. And well, I think earlier, I don't know if you followed all the news, but there's some press releases on the new hypercar class.
Yes, that looks really interesting. That Aston Martin already have confirmed they intend to enter with Valkyrie, I think it is.
Yeah, and after that, Toyota confirmed as well that they will make a hypercar. So we have two manufacturers already confirmed. I think
Bike-Collars are interested in bringing a car out for it as well, aren't they?
Yeah, I think so. I've heard some talks about McLaren at least considering it. So lots of interesting developments there. I mean, they're still a year away, right, before they start racing. But yeah, that's definitely a development we're following closely. Because right now we don't have the fastest class, and that's something obviously in the future we do want to change.
So you've caught me just in the braking zone.
I was just entering a similar braking zone, I guess, and that's why I stopped talking.
This is the problem with live talk and drives on a track that's notoriously difficult on the stop pedal. So apologies for that one, folks at home. Now, this is when rFactor is at its best for me. It's starting to get the sunset, starting to get dark, and the track looks absolutely beautiful in these conditions. It's I know it's not really a question that anybody particularly wants to hear the answer for, because it's not telling us anything about the future, but are you proud of rFactor 2 when you're doing moments like this and you see it looking like it does at the moment?
Oh yeah, I'm absolutely proud, because I still remember vividly where we're coming from in terms of features, in terms of graphics, etc. So I'm very proud of what we achieved and what the team have done on the code side, also on the content side. I mean, we've made a pretty big step already. Am I happy already where we are? No, I still want to do a lot more. I mean, there's still improvements we can do, and I think one of the things we're in the middle of is actually updating our shaders, our lighting, our material system. This track is already using some new shaders, as we promised we would also do for Nordschleife when it's released. To be fair, we're still in the middle of that process. We've had a few setbacks, so we need a bit more time to get everything done there. But that said, this is already looking quite promising, as you can see. Track is very beautiful, and it will only get better, I think. And we will certainly also do another update of the track once we've finalized that development work, because we're really still in the middle of it right now. So there will be an update later.
So this one is using then the new or whatever you've got available of the new material systems at the moment.
That's correct, Paul. Yeah. So it's sort of an intermediate version, I would say. We're still not done with it, but yeah, it's already using some of the new stuff. Yeah.
Now, I'm not sure if he's still on the voice chat, but we've got Mr. Paul Glover performing streaming duties for us today. He was keeping an eye on the chat on our Twitch channel. And just a nod to that, actually. Apologies, guys, for the last-minute switch to Twitch for this show. We've encountered some YouTube technical difficulties right at the very death. So apologies to that one. But Paul, if you're around and you're in a position to speak, have you got any questions from the viewers that we want to fire Marcel's way?
I can absolutely give an update on where we stand right now. I think our latest roadmap, we already said that we're integrating all the last little bits of the launcher that we had in front of the game. So that's being integrated into the new UI. There was some work to be done there because, well, as you know, the launcher does some multiplayer stuff. Showing you a server list and things like that and allowing you to filter it, but it also has some of the package management things, and by moving that into the game itself, it also gave us the opportunity to integrate it a little bit better with the whole Steam workshop that we have and with the item store for our paid content. So we've integrated all of those into the main game. And really for the UI, we're currently going through a testing phase where we're ironing out the last bugs. I think feature-wise, we're done. We have the UI done, and we have a first version of the competition system done. That's not the final system yet. I mean, there's still a bit of work we want to add to that, but we want to start with a basic system that works for everybody and that has a few new exciting features. So that has our full focus on the code side at the moment. So I think it shouldn't take too long. I'm obviously a bit hesitant naming exact dates, but I would say a month or two, and we should have something we can start sharing with the public. And we're still discussing whether or not to make that sort of a public beta test first. That's probably what we'll end up doing, just to give everybody the opportunity to try it out, to play with it, to give their feedback. Because honestly, I mean, we've been working on this for so long, based on what we think people want to see and want to do. And once we'll get feedback from users actually telling us what we should have done. And by having a public beta phase, we can probably better incorporate such feedback and build everybody an end product that they're all happy with. At least that's what I hope.
So, okay, so Paul's just informed me that actually his voice can't be heard on the stream, so I will repeat Paul's questions. Marcel, when can we expect to see the viewers would like to know the Nürburgring, the Nordschleife, should I say, in rFactor 2?
So let's say we release Le Mans this weekend. Let's be optimistic for a bit. Might be a bit later, but we'll see about that. I think we'll probably roughly release Nordschleife a month to 6 weeks or so after that. We need a bit more time to finish that. We've pulled some of the resources that have been working on Nordschleife to actually make this release in time. So we'll be full steam ahead next on the Nordschleife, and yeah, I think my estimate is about 4 to 6 weeks after we release Le Mans.
Oh wow! So it is not far away then. Been a busy time at Studio 397, building two of the biggest tracks in motor racing.
Absolutely, yeah.
So another question we've been asked as we just quickly jump back into the server: is there any updates coming to the endurance pack? We've been asked.
Yes, actually, there is. We've been monitoring a lot of the online leagues at the moment that have been using this endurance pack and looking at the balance of performance of the different cars. And we've been seeing some discrepancies here and there. So one thing we'll be doing is releasing a balance of performance update. That will, I'm not sure when we will release that, but that's fairly soon. And we're also working on some new stuff, but it's a bit too early to be specific about exactly what.
Okay, I just want to go back quickly to the UI question. When people were asking about the UI to be released, and you alluded to the fact that it's going to come with a certain amount of functionality and more to be added later. Is it fair to say then that this UI is going to be something that grows as the simulation matures? So it's going to be something you're going to add to over time?
Yeah, that's definitely the case. I mean, we started building this UI from scratch because we were not happy with the existing UI, and especially how hard it was, how time consuming it was to extend it. Now, given our track record of getting the new UI released, you might say, well, the new UI is probably not that easy to work with either. But I think that has some other reasons, so I don't think that was a bad decision. I mean, the new UI is completely built on web technology, which means that it's a lot easier to extend. There's a lot more people that know about web technology and can leverage that, so that means that we can also get help from others a lot more easy. I think it's fair to say that this first release will be the basis on which we'll do many more updates in the future. Yep.
Oh, that's...
Have we lost Paul? Okay, it seems, guys, that we have lost Paul, our interviewer.
I'm back.
He's back. Awesome.
I would like to blame it on technical difficulties, but actually it was finger trouble. So, people are asking if there's any updates coming to GT3, just cars in general, really, in terms of updates. I don't know whether they mean physics side of things or BOP, that kind of thing, Marcel.
So yeah, BOP definitely. I mean, probably the GT3s are a lot closer than, for example, the GTEs that I was talking about a little bit earlier, but we also want to look at them and balance them a bit more because, well, we do see there's some cars slightly faster than the others. So it's good to do a fix on that. Let me think, in terms of GT3 cars, will we have something new? I don't think at the moment we have anything planned. I mean, we're obviously talking to manufacturers and might do updates, but there's nothing in the pipeline right now.
Thank you very much. As we're starting the race, and I almost missed it because I was too busy remapping a button. So I'll follow you into this opening stint at Le Mans. Paul, do we have any more questions from the viewers that we want to throw? So we're being asked, this is a long question and a long answer no doubt, the workflows at Studio 397, it's perceived that it takes quite a while to bring content out to the sim from the point of announcement. And they wanted to know really what sort of work's involved to bring new content to the sim, and why the long lead times?
Well,
Good luck answering that one.
That's a good question. First of all, I would like to challenge that it takes a long time for us to release something, but maybe that's the perception from the outside. We might announce stuff a bit earlier than some of our competitors, which makes it seem like a long time from the first announcement until something actually gets released. I mean, building content is obviously a lot of work. Tracks a lot more even than cars. I would roughly say that if we build a car, it takes us about 2 months from the first step till finishing a car. For tracks, it's usually more, well, anywhere between 4 to 8 months for going through that process. And that's usually not just one guy working on it, especially for tracks. We typically have teams of about 3 or 4 persons working on a track. And for cars, it's on average, I would say, 2 people working on various aspects of such a car. I mean, I think in one of the final roadmaps of last year, I listed all the things that we did that year in terms of new tracks and new cars. And I would actually like to challenge the community to find a sim that has released more stuff than we did.
Yeah, you make a fair point. You do make a fair point. And actually talking about the ratio between releasing new content and making fundamental changes to the core title, what's the goal at Studio 397? Is it to increase the content base of the sim, or what sort of weighting do you apply to the actual fundamental bug fixing, feature enhancements and upgrades and whatnot to RF2 itself?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I can probably answer that in terms of how big the coding team is versus the content team. That might give you a reasonable indication of how we balance things. I think at the moment the two are actually roughly equal in size. Obviously a lot of the coding team is working on UI and competition at the moment, but there's also a lot of smaller bugs that we've been fixing over the years, so it's definitely not the case that we're only working on new stuff. We're also fixing a lot of things. But as it goes with my own mind, I mean, once a bug is fixed, you get used to it not being there anymore, and pretty soon after you've forgotten that it ever was there, and you just think it's normal like this. So I think when I remember the first days of us taking over, we were talking with people about stuff like you cannot alt-tab back to your desktop anymore in any way because rFactor will completely crash when you do that. That kind of stuff had been around for years. That's been fixed by now and has been fixed for quite a long time, and people are just finding it normal again that you can, which they should, because it is normal that you can. But those types of bugs are not really big news or in the front of people's minds after they're fixed. They're only issues if you run into them. So yeah, we still have a lot of bugs left to fix. That's fair to say. And we want to keep improving the code base. That's also true because, well, we're in this for the long run, Paul. It's something I think the whole team at Studio enjoys doing, and we're going to keep doing this for a very long time to come. So it's in our own interest to make sure that we have a stable base to work on. and that we can evolve that over time.
That's good to hear. And actually, it's a good point that for those who've maybe not followed rFactor 2 from the beginning, Studio 397 and yourself took over development from ISI, who originally, Image Space Incorporated, who originally launched the software. How challenging has that been to basically take over where somebody else has left off and understand the core architecture and the mechanics of the title? Has that brought fresh problems that wouldn't have existed, for example, if you were the guys that built it right from the very, very beginnings?
Oh yeah, we certainly had a few challenges that we wouldn't have had we created everything ourselves. I mean, the code base is quite big, and especially the first couple of years, we were learning a lot about all the different aspects of this code base, and trying to improve things bit by bit there. There's still a few areas that we haven't touched a lot and that we need to look into. So that has been a technical challenge, trying to sort of map out this whole code base and understanding it. And I mean, there's some pretty smart guys at ISI that made this stuff. So a lot of things you really need to look maybe 5 or 6 or 7 times before you fully understand all the nuances of that code. I mean, it's easy to go in and say, oh, maybe there's something wrong, let me just fix that. And then you actually do that and you recognize, might be that bit of code was there for a reason after all. So we've had a few of those moments, and we're learning a lot there. And I think the other challenge we had is, I mean, you have a product that's already out, which means you have a lot of existing users. I mean, they paid ISI, so they own the product, and we have to support all of those users. And at the same time, we also need to come up with a business model that supports the people at Studio, because obviously they also want to get paid, and that obviously is a little bit of a challenge and a little bit of a balance between the things you do. I think we've found a reasonable balance. I'm sure some people will disagree and say we should have done it slightly differently, but we're still around, and I think that's a bit of proof that we're at least doing some things right. But yeah, I mean, if you start a new product from scratch, you wouldn't have some of these issues. You would probably have a few others that we don't have right now. So there's positives and negatives to that, I would say.
And you did say that you're in this for the long haul, so is it fair to say that development of rFactor 2 is going to continue for the foreseeable future, and you're not planning a follow-on title or breaking away to something new?
No, just to be completely pragmatic here, I mean, we're licensing a lot of new content, and licenses usually last a couple of years. It depends a little bit on what you negotiate, but let's say that typically a license lasts for about 3 years. So, I mean, if we are still licensing new content, it wouldn't make sense for us to stop working on a title or stop selling a title anywhere in the next 3 years or so. Which
Excellent.
doesn't mean we're not already looking ahead also at our future and what to do in 3, 5, or 10 years. And at some point we obviously will decide to build a new title, but that's not anywhere in the near future, that's for sure.
Right, Mr. Glover, whisper sweet nothings into our ears for a moment.
Well, they can hear me now, I think, so I fixed that, so this is good. Marcel, a lot of people are asking about safety car. Any updates to that coming? Because I must admit, I have found that a little bit frustrating from time to time, and that's one of the quite a few people have asked that question. Any updates coming to the safety car in the game?
Are we talking about graphical updates, just using a new type of safety
behavior?
Car? Behavior of the safety car. That's a good one, because we haven't got much planned there, so maybe it's a good idea to point me to some shortcomings of the current safety car and see what we can do from there.
Okay, great.
And just to interrupt you a second, Paul, if any of the viewers do have some useful constructive criticism regarding the safety car, drop a note in the thread at RaceDepartment for this live stream with some details, and then I'm sure Marcel will be able to grab a moment and just take those back to the team at 397.
Absolutely.
Okay, mate, sorry about that.
Another one. Anything about ambient temperatures going to affect the track temps in the future? You know, because obviously at Le Mans, when it's 24 hours, the track will cool down as it gets to night time and so forth. Any information on that?
That's one of the things we're holding off until we have the UI done. We actually do know how to approach that problem, how to extend the physics model to incorporate that. The interesting story there maybe is that when we actually took over, I had a few sessions with the developers at ISI, just so they could explain us a little bit more about the code base and how it was structured. And this was actually one of the explicit topics and questions I had to them on how that currently works and how we could extend the physics model to incorporate ambient temperature changes and their effects on the tires of the cars. So that's definitely coming, but it needs to wait a little bit longer until we're done with the UI. Now I'm hearing a bit of static on my headset, and I'm not hearing any of the polls anymore. And I'm not sure whether people are hearing me on the stream. Yes, now I can hear you.
Good, good. That's lucky, because I'd kind of forgot the question I was going to ask halfway through. But I want to just throw it back to Le Mans for a moment, because obviously this is the centerpiece of what we're doing out on track here as we speak. This is the pinnacle of long-distance endurance racing. You've already got day-to-night transition, and whether you do 24-hour racing and driver swaps. But driver swaps have been a little bit hit and miss in various ways in the past with rFactor 2. So things like tyre wear not necessarily transferring over every time. There's a bit of smoothing needs to be done in that department. Is that something you're aware of at Studio, and something that you're looking to take to task in the near future?
Yeah, I think actually one of the issues regarding tire wear we recently fixed. That was the issue that thermal degradation in the tire, which depends on how you heat cycle the tires over their lifetime, wasn't properly transferred, or wasn't transferred at all when you did a driver swap, which meant your tires were worn, but they didn't exhibit the effects of that degradation any longer. That's something we actually found and fixed in the code, or rather added to the code, as there just wasn't any code there to transfer that. I think there's one or two issues still left that we're looking into regarding those driver swaps and data that might not always transfer correctly. We're also looking at the process of driver swapping, which is kind of, well, people who've been around rFactor 2 know what the process is like, but it takes a couple of steps, and it really doesn't always make sense to have all those different steps. So actually in the new UI we are already simplifying the way we do driver swaps, and for the competition system we're going another step when we add teams to that, because once we have teams we can actually know what car you can swap into and what car is not yours. Well, basically every other car, right? So right now you can in theory try to do a driver swap with anybody on a server, and once we have the team system in the competition system, we will actually be able to limit that to just doing swaps with your own team and not anybody else, and there will be less steps involved in that whole process. So it's definitely something we're looking at and improving over time, yes.
And that was an impressively coherent answer for someone going through the Porsche curves.
Almost crashing into Dunlop.
Paul, I don't know if you're still with us. We've got a bit of static going on a moment ago. Have we got any other pressing concerns from our viewers out there at the moment? Yes, we can hear you. So, Paul's informing us that the stream viewers can't hear him, so I'll just repeat the question for your benefit. Marcel, we've been asked by the viewers regarding physics in wet conditions. So, are there any improvements? I know you've alluded to this in the past, around the time of the big rain update that we got at the Expo last year, I think. What are the plans there in terms of physics enhancements for wet driving, please?
So yeah, I think the first thing we're gonna look at to improve on the wet physics is the actual grip levels in the wet. I think that's what you were referring to as well, Paul, when you just mentioned that. I've been telling that before. I don't believe those grip levels are 100% correct at the moment. Especially when it comes to driving on a very rubbered ideal line, which becomes very slippery in the wet. And right now in rFactor 2 it's not as slippery as it should be, so that's definitely something we're going to address. On the aquaplaning we haven't actually decided yet. I mean, it's something we're still looking into, so I can't promise anything there. I mean, we've had a few people comment in the past that when we added these puddle maps that they were just visual and there was no relationship to the actual water on the track, which in fact isn't totally true, because even though the puddle maps are things that you graphically draw on top of the road surface, their appearance and the size of the puddles is actually directly linked to the water depth on the track at that piece of surface. So what we did was something that was completely invisible, namely the water level, and make it visible through these puddle maps. So it's probably fair to say that there already is a physics relationship between the puddles that you actually see and how the tires respond. What isn't there, what we just said, aquaplaning, that's not in at the moment. That's something we still need to investigate and see how we can implement that and how difficult it is to do.
But it is something that's on the agenda at the studio to review at some stage in the future.
We will definitely investigate it. I just don't know if we can build it and how much time it will cost. So I'm a little bit vague intentionally on it. Yeah.
Cool, no problem, thank you. And as I mount the curbs, and I've got my steering set a little bit too heavy, so that almost ripped my wrists off. Excellent. We're getting into the dark. Now. We've got weather cycle on this, and I've not mapped my headlights, so I'm going to start bringing this interview to a close. But I just want to. Oh, my headlights are on. I've been whispered in the ear by Paul, so that's that problem solved. Any more questions, Paul, you wish to whisper to us? Okay, so Paul's asked about wind effects on the cars and if there are any plans around that one. I'm assuming that means wind direction upsetting the aerodynamic balance or something along those lines.
Yeah, that is definitely another area that we will implement, because that was one of the other questions I asked the ISI guys back in the day, where to find that and how that currently works in code. So I'm pretty confident that we can implement wind direction and wind speed and how that affects aerodynamics of the car.
Now that's interesting, because am I right in thinking that the car's aerodynamics are affected when following another car at the moment, so you lose downforce when closer to a car in front?
Absolutely, that's already in those effects, yep.
Yeah, because that's something that has a massive impact on the racing experience, especially in an online environment when the Formula One effect, where you get into the dirty air and it slows you down. And they're the little touches in rFactor 2 that I very much enjoy, I must admit. And it's critical, really, for a serious racing simulator, which kind of leads me on to my next question. Where do you see rFactor 2 on the spectrum of racing sims? Is it something that's a pick up and play kind of title, or is it a more serious long distance racer or that kind of thing?
Oh, that's an interesting question, because I would probably say, in terms of physics, we're trying to push the limits of what you can do on a normal PC. So there we're quite high end, I would say. But where I'd like to be in terms of gameplay is that we become a lot better at new people just jumping into a car and enjoying themselves with the simulation. I mean, a lot of people say, yeah, if you want to do that, you have to dumb down the physics a lot more. I don't agree with that. I think a proper responding car can be easy and fun to drive, even for a beginner. It just depends a little bit on the car and what technical aids it has. In the future, I would definitely like to see rFactor 2 being a very realistic simulation. That's also quite easy to get started with. That would be my goal in a couple of sentences.
And is that the some of the rationale behind the substantial UI update as well? Is just to get a more user-friendly, coherent experience?
Yeah, because we know we need to change a lot of things in the UI to improve that experience, streamline a lot of things. So before you can actually start doing that, the first thing you need to do is make sure that you can make changes to the UI a lot quicker than you can now. So streamlining that whole experience is definitely, I would say, the main reason for even doing the UI update.
And I know people are going to be screaming at their monitors asking me to ask you more about the UI, but I'm going to steer clear of that one because we have got the interview coming up and I don't want to spoil all the nuggets of gold from that one in this video. But you did talk about, you've got, so far, correct me if I've missed anything off here, you've got the Tortoise single-seater cars announced and scheduled and planned. Obviously, we've got Nodes that's coming out as well at some time in the near future. Do you have, I know you probably can't share it with us, but do you have a roadmap, an internal roadmap of what you're intending to bring to the sim over the next 1, 2, 3 years?
Yeah, we definitely do. I wouldn't say in all areas that it reaches and looks ahead for 3 years. I mean, especially on the content side, we like to keep our minds open and see what's happening in the racing world. I mean, new cars, new classes coming up, and sometimes talking to manufacturers, certain opportunities coming up, like we had with McLaren when we did Shadow competition last year, when we had the opportunity to do a few classic Formula One cars. So we do keep our minds open, but yeah, in terms of planning and licensing, I mean, those are always processes that take a long time. So we definitely have an internal roadmap which lists on the content side a couple of things we would like to have into the sim, and we're typically chasing those and chasing a couple of those options because not everything always works out. Yeah, those typically are also things we can't really share because those licensing talks usually require us to sign an NDA and not talk about them, etc., etc. But yeah, I mean, there is an internal roadmap, and yes, we are already looking at what the next track after Nordschleife will be. And no, I really don't have one license yet at the moment, so it's a process we're in the middle of, I would say.
Well, while you were saying that, I've done a Toyota and run out of fuel. I forgot, that's something I forgot to do. So, at least I don't have to concentrate on driving. Couple more questions before we wrap up for the evening then, Marcel. When you're... Yeah, if Paul's going to whisper in my ear while I'm asking this next question, so I've got one lined up. So do fire away, please, Paul. We've been asked to ask you about damage model and dirt buildup. So that's the detail on the windscreen. So obviously endurance racing, long distance. There's a lot of debris from the circuit and flies and muck and whatnot come onto the screens. And I must admit that is one of my gripes with RF2. They do look a little bit clean sometimes, the cars. Is that anything that you share that opinion at 397? Something you're looking at doing?
I absolutely do, and there's a couple of technical reasons why we are where we are right now. In the past, we even had a little bit of a dirt buildup on the actual cars, while I'm not forgetting to make a pit stop now and not run out of fuel. But that model we had on the dirt buildup was a little bit too simple for my taste, so I asked the guys to take it out for now until we have something that's a bit better. So that's dirt buildup on the actual car bodies. The other thing we're considering is dirt buildup on the windscreen, and in general I would say also scratches and reflections on the windscreen. And there at the moment we have the problem that the shader that we have for windscreens, if you start applying a little bit of dirt to it, it works well during the daytime, but at night when you have a lot of headlights from cars behind you, for some reason that shader transforms the whole windscreen into this hazy, milky white thing that you can't see through anymore, or can't see through very well anymore. I'm sure you've seen a bit of that effect sometime. And that's really not that great for night racing. So for now we said let's make those windscreens clear, so they work and you can actually properly race them at night without running into issues. And one of the efforts we're working on right now with the new material system is actually an update of that windscreen shader that fixes the issue I just mentioned. And the other thing that's a bit weird at the moment is how reflections on the windscreen look from within the cockpit, or I would say how reflections look in the cockpit full stop.
Yeah, that's something you've already spoke about in various roadmaps, I think, is the shader improvements and updates to the cockpit of the cars, the various cars.
Exactly. So that's what we're working on, and the windshield will be part of that. And once we fix that problem, we can start reintroducing dirt buildup again. That's basically the order in which we have to do things.
Fantastic. Right, Marcel, we have got a few more questions in the chat, but I'm going to draw this thing to a close now because my wife's popped in and she's waving at me wildly. I don't know what's the matter, but there seems to be a problem in the Jeffrey household.
It's either a problem or an opportunity, Paul.
Yes, exactly. So, for you guys at home, I know it's been short and sweet. We have got a more substantial interview with Marcel coming at RaceDepartment.com very, very soon. So please do bear in mind that a lot of the questions you are asking will be answered in that interview. One last one I'm going to fire at because someone's really asked a couple of times now for it, is the amount of cores in CPU is growing by the year. Are there any plans maybe spread tyre physics calculations to available cores? So one tyre per core or something similar? And that's from Steam B Jokery, I believe. So great question, mate. Thank you. I'll end on that one, Marcel, if I may.
And I have a very short answer to that. Yes.
Outstanding. That's what we like to see. There you go. Short and sweet. Care to elaborate, sir? Chance? As Paul's laughing in the background saying, I love it, that's a brilliant answer. Is there anything you can elaborate on that one at this moment, Marcel?
Well, it's something we're looking into. It requires a little bit of restructuring of the code, but it does make sense as we can calculate those tires in parallel on different cores. The stuff we need to look into is how to synchronize the data going from one core to the next, because currently all the physics are on a single core, which is a little bit simpler in terms of accessing and synchronizing data, but it is something we're looking into, and it will probably happen. We also do need to see how it will affect the balance as well, so using more CPU cores to improve graphics. So it will probably be a bit of both, but doing the tire calculations on different cores makes a lot of sense, so that's on our short list for sure.
Yep. Oh, fantastic. And I'm going to run the risk of the wrath of my good lady by asking one last question. Ray tracing, making a lot of noise in the graphics industry at the moment, although I'm not sure exactly how widely utilised that is. Is that on your agenda? You're obviously a tech-driven background with Luminous. Is ray tracing something we might see in rFactor's future?
So we're ideally waiting for Microsoft to expose that as part of DirectX, so it's not dependent on a specific manufacturer. And there's definitely developments in that direction, so we're following those. I think a lot of games and racing games are following it. I think Assetto Corsa Competizione did a tech demo already with NVIDIA showing that off, and I mean, when it works, it looks absolutely great. I just would prefer a solution that works for every graphics card and not just one of them. So we're looking into that, and we might actually introduce a bit of ray tracing in our cockpit update that we're doing later this year. That will not be one specific to any manufacturer, but yeah, that's we're looking into that technology. I mean, it's not a new technology, but it's new that this becomes possible in some form in real-time rendering. So it's definitely something we'll keep an eye on, and we'll hopefully start using in a few years from now on a big scale.
Superb, that's really good to hear, thank you. And I suppose all that leaves me left to do is first and foremost thank the viewers for tuning in and throwing your questions. Please do bear in mind the questions that we've not answered will more than likely be covered in the interview that we're having with Marcel very, very soon. So please do stick around our RaceDepartment.com. Paul's very kindly put a thread in the chat, need it. Please do give us a like and a subscribe and a follow on Twitch and on our YouTube channel as well. And most important of all, thank you for Mr. Marcel Offermans for your time. As always, my friend, much appreciated for coming to talk to us today.
You're very welcome. It's always fun to talk to you guys, so please invite me back.
Oh, we certainly will, sir. Around a big German track that's coming out, might be a good time to do another one of these. And guys and girls watching at home, we've also got a podcast, so feel free to search for that and just search Race Department at your podcast of choice. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Twitch and YouTube, and at racedepartment.com as well. So get in touch, stay tuned with us all. And until next time, thank you all for tuning in. Sorry for the last minute nature of this stream. It was kind of Marcel and I were just chatting over Skype and said, why don't we do a stream? What about tomorrow? Yeah, let's do it. So a little bit last minute, and sorry for the technical hitches. We'll be better next time, I promise. And no thanks whatsoever to Mr. Paul Glover, who's just sat down for the free ride in the background and contributed nothing to the stream, Paul. Nothing. Thanks a lot, guys. See you all next time. Take care. Sim racing's awesome. Ta-ra.